This is VK6ARN, Newswest. We are a community organisation and we've been serving up the best amateur radio news in Australia since 1931.
Hi there, I'm Clinton, VK6FCRC, and welcome to Newswest for the 25th of August 2024. Now on with the show.
Now, folks, have you set aside the date for Perth Tech? It's only a month away, and it's on the Saturday, the 21st of September. Perth Tech is a full day of presentations of a technical and practical nature, which are aimed at amateur radio operators. The presentations are followed by an optional sundowner. This year, we're charging a fee of $30, almost all of which goes towards your morning and afternoon teas, lunch, and a few other bits and pieces. We rely on donations and the on-site raffle to pay for the venue and other expenses. In past years, local amateur radio clubs have supported Perth Tech with generous donations, and it would be great if that could happen again. So, clubs, talk amongst yourselves, please. Everything you need to know about Perth Tech is on the website, vk6.net. Hopefully I'll be catching up, or will have caught up with lots of you at Hamfest today. I'm Bob, VK6POP.
Hello, this is Dennis, VK6AKR for the WAVHF Group Incorporated. Thank you to the amateurs who were able to participate in last weekend's Remembrance Day contest, and to Robert, VK6WHO, who organised our team comprising himself, Mark, VK6EZ, and yours truly. A great time was had over the weekend. Robert and Mark worked from their respective QTHs, while I worked from Wireless Hill. The weather was excellent for operation from QTHs, hi, and may have been a factor in bringing many operators on the air. It had its usual friendly nature, and there were even some minor pile-ups in the early stages. It will be interesting to know the overall VK6 score that will be revealed in due course. In the meantime, though, please take the opportunity to submit your log, not only for the overall VK6 tally, but even more importantly to honour your QSO partners' efforts to be on air. Without corroborating log entries, your and your partners' contacts do not count. These days, for me, being on air would not be complete without some efforts to make contact on that other magic band, 23 centimetres. There is growing interest among the WAVHF group members in 23 centimetres. Dave, VK6KV, is purchasing and building a series of mini-kits modules to form a transverter. By the time he completes the final module, the local oscillator, I hope to have my Adlam Pluto and Charon module complete and operational. For anyone looking to build an antenna for that band, I can recommend the Biquad, or my variant, the Bicircle, which makes tuning after construction much easier. See you on 23 centimetres soon. Finally, a shout-out for Perth Tech, which is coming to Gidgegannup next month. Saturday the 21st is the date that you should enter into your calendar or diary. Amongst the presenters this year will be Professor Peter Hall, VK6HP from Curtin University, whose explanation about the VLF station VK6MJM at Manjimup is certain to be of interest. VK6MJM started life as an aeronautical non-directional beacon. When it became redundant, Peter took the opportunity to establish a station on 2200 metres and 470 metres for exploring the propagation in these bands. This is a presentation not to be missed. And a shameless plug. WAVHF group member Dave, VK6KV, and I will offer our thoughts on measuring dielectric permittivity, and hence velocity factor, for insulated wires such as building wire. We measure, too, the influence on velocity factor when using radomes made from commonly available plastics, reticulation pipe and electrical conduit, for example. We will demonstrate these measurements using a nano VNA, but a similar process could use a grid dip oscillator or gate dip oscillator. We hope that our presentation will take some of the error out of the usual trial and error tuning process. Until next time, thanks for listening. This is Dennis, VK6AKR, for the WAVHF Group.
Hi, just a little note about VK6RRG and the WARG Technical and General Net. Having it run every Sunday morning on VK6RLM, that's 146.750, or Channel 3 in the old money. And it starts at 10:30 a.m. this morning. Of course, if you're listening in the evening, it's next week.
On Tuesday afternoons and evenings, the 40 and 80 metre bands come alive with the sound of slow CW. Who would have thought that this ancient art, which some say was once such a dreaded part of the amateur licence test, would become so popular in these days of modern communications? The uncontrolled net is run in designated portions of the two bands to encourage new CW operators to have a go at slow CW in a safe and really friendly environment. Slow speed and lots of mistakes are par for the course. It's all about having a go, starting with a basic call sign and RST exchange, then over time getting better and better. The net also attracts its fair share of old-timers who enjoy helping others to have a go or to just enjoy the banter. The CQ-QRS net started in Western Australia 3 years ago and has been running every single Tuesday and has been unbelievably popular. The net runs from 3 p.m. until about 7 p.m. on 40 metres, then moves to 80 metres, and we've had up to 60 stations on air having a go, and who knows how many listeners are out there every Tuesday as well. So the CQ-QRS net is on 40 metres between 0700 Zulu and 1100 Zulu, that is 3 p.m. until 7 p.m, and is held between 7020 and 7040 kHz. Then between 0900 Zulu and 1300 Zulu, which is 5 p.m. until 9 p.m, we're on between 3540 and 3570 kHz every Tuesday. There's no net control, so when you're ready to have a go, just find a quiet spot and start calling CQ-QRS at about 75% of the speed you can copy. Most stations will match your speed, so go slow until you're really comfortable with CW. So this might be just the opportunity you've been waiting for to have a go at transmitting on CW, or perhaps just to stop the contacts rusting up on your key. Doesn't matter whether you're brand new to the code, or if you're an old-timer who would like to have a bit of fun and help encourage new operators by having simple, safe QSOs at their speed. We'd love to have you join in. Too much switch mode power supply hash on 80 metres? This might be the incentive to do something about it. With a cheap noise canceller costing less than $100, 80 metres could be easier than you think. So again, the net starts at 3 p.m. every Tuesday above the DX segment on 40 metres between 7020 and 7040. Then, after 7 p.m, moves to 80 metres between 3540 and 3570 kHz. There are usually stations in the west, east and in between listening out for your CQ-QRS call. For more information and to receive our free weekly CQ-QRS RagTune newsletter, contact me, Mark, VK6QI, via the email on qrz.com, or you can use our address cqqrsnet@gmail.com. That is cqqrsnet@gmail.com, and I'll be pleased to have a chat.
This is Newswest, your amateur radio news on VK6ARN, originating on the Newswest linked repeater network and HF relays.
Foundations of Amateur Radio. Getting started in our hobby can be a challenge. Even if you've got a shiny new license and you've been taught what the legal requirements are, you might even have your first radio. But after that, it might feel like you're all on your own in this bright and shiny new world. It doesn't have to be that way. First thing to know is that you are exactly where all other amateurs have been before you. In other words, don't stress too much about what you don't know or what mistakes you might make. I recently read a comment from a new amateur who was so scared of making a mistake that they hadn't made their first contact. You should know that there is a massive difference between making an accidental mistake and knowingly interfering with another service. Here's some mistakes I've made. My license permits a maximum power level of 10 watts. I dutifully set up my radio to do just that. Made my first contact on HF using 10 watts, only to learn later that power levels are set separately for HF, 6 meters, VHF, and UHF on my specific radio. So the second time I keyed up my microphone, I was using 50 watts. Not only that, I didn't quite understand how to set up my radio for repeater use. So I keyed up on the output frequency and happily talked to the other station, blissfully unaware that I wasn't actually using the repeater. It wasn't until several years later that I learned that the minimum power level was 5 watts on all bands, except UHF, where it is 2 watts. And as icing on the cake, one day I managed a 2-meter contact across about 70 kilometers from my car. It wasn't until later in the night that I discovered that all the settings on my radio had reset, and it was again using 50 watts. Another time I was in the club Radio Shack and having some fun with the club station. I tuned to a 2-meter frequency and called CQ. Didn't hear anything. Then I discovered that I'd missed a decimal point and was actually transmitting on the 20-meter band, where I'm not permitted with my license. Each of those things are outside the restrictions of my license, but made by mistake, not on purpose. Instead of stressing about it, I went, oops, and carried on with a new lesson learned. I will point out that I'm certain that there are more mistakes. Feel free to let me know. Those concerns aside, finding people to talk to is another barrier to entry. We have all these bands and there's nobody about. It reminds me of a funny story I've shared before, told by Wally, Victor Kilo 6 Yankee Sierra, now Silent Key. In his early amateur radio days, he operated from Cockatoo Island, an island off the north coast of Western Australia near Yampi Sound, which is where his call sign came from. With a new radio and transverter for 6 meters, Wally had been calling CQ for weeks, but nobody would talk to him. Occasionally he'd hear a faint voice in the background. Meanwhile, it transpired that amateurs across Japan were getting upset that he wasn't responding to their 20 and 40/9 signal reports. His transmission was getting out just fine. His receiver wasn't working nearly as well. Turns out that during manufacturing, a pin on the back of his transverter hadn't been soldered correctly. Oops. Once he fixed that, he worked 150 Japanese stations on the first day, and a lifelong love of the 6-meter band was born. One hard-learned lesson is that the bands are constantly changing. If you cannot hear anything on one band, try another. If the band is quiet, it's likely because the conditions for that band are bad. But generally this is only true on HF. On VHF and UHF, the opposite is often true. Some bands, like 10 meters and 6 meters, behave more like VHF, but not always. 20 meters can go from brilliant to abysmal and back in seconds, sometimes during the contact. Each band has its own idiosyncrasies that you'll need to explore before you can hope to improve your chances of success, and even years of playing will often get you surprises. I recall trying, for giggles only, to call CQ on a pretty quiet band, only to score an unexpected contact with a Central European station on the other side of the globe. A good rule of thumb is to go where the action is. If you can hear others, they're much more likely to hear you. While this is not universally true, it's a good starting point. Of course, you don't need to physically have a radio to experience any of this. There are many websites that provide you with access to radio tuners. If you search for Web SDR or Kiwi SDR, you'll come across hundreds of online receivers that you can tune and operate on the frequencies they support, using just your web browser. Some have the ability to decode digital modes within the web page, so you won't even have to install any extra software to play. You might think that using such a receiver is not really amateur radio, but I'd like to point out that a transceiver is both a transmitter and a receiver. You can get the receiver right there in your web browser. The transmitter is a little more complex, but technically also possible. Many amateur clubs have a remote accessible station which will allow you to get started. That kills two birds with one stone. You get to interact with the people in the club, and you get to play on air without needing to figure out just which radio to get and what antenna to connect it to and where to put either. Other places to find new friends are, of course, social media, the so-called Fediverse, a collection of social networking services that can communicate with each other, has several communities. You can get started at mastodon.radio and lemmy.radio. There's plenty of other on-air activities like nets, discussion groups where you can get to know other amateurs. I run a weekly net for new and returning amateurs called F-Troop on Saturday morning, midnight UTC for an hour, where you can say hello and ask questions. We pass the microphone around a circle so everyone gets a go. You'll find more information at ftroop.groups.ao. Getting started does not have to be a daunting experience. Get on air, make noise, and before you know it, you'll have forgotten just how much you worried about the things that really didn't cause any issues in the big picture. If you're still stuck, drop me an email, cq@vk6flab.com, and I'll attempt to point you in the right direction. What are you waiting for? I'm Ono, Victor Kilo 6, Foxtrot Lima, Alpha Bravo.
This is Newswest, your amateur radio news on VK6ARN, originating on the Newswest linked repeater network and HF relays.
Hi, I'm Bob, VK6POP. How did you go in the Remembrance Day contest last weekend? I'm glad I didn't do it from a portable site this year because the weather was cold and wet, and because I enjoyed a weekend with fellow members of the Hills Amateur Radio Group at the Club Shack, working the contest there. What I really liked about the weekend was that a handful of club members had their first contesting experience, and that's a good thing, isn't it? Club stations, or should I say multi-operator stations, are a good place for someone to learn the ropes, and the RD contest is a good contest to learn in because of its relaxed pace and friendly atmosphere. Something else happened. It wasn't unexpected, but it was good to see, was that people joined in, were willing to learn, and helped with the chores while the station ran for the full 24 hours. And further afield, what a good turnout there was from Western Australia. At the time of counting, Thursday evening, there were 31 logs submitted from VK6, and here's your reminder, if you haven't yet submitted your log, don't leave it until the last minute. It's so easy to do. Your logging software can export your log in Cabrillo format, which can be uploaded at the VK Log Checker website. Let me run that website by you again, vklogchecker, no spaces, vklogchecker.com. If you're having trouble understanding how to generate and send your log, ask for help. There's another good contest coming up in early October, the Oceania DX contest, a bit faster paced, but this time with international participation. Who's up for that? On another subject, Prawnheads is a bunch of radio-oriented people who meet for lunch every Wednesday at 12 noon, and you're welcome to rock up and join in. It's a buy and eat your own food and drinks deal. You choose, you pay, you eat. Meanwhile, the world's problems get solved and we even talk about amateur radio stuff. Honest, we do. I hear you thinking, why Prawnheads? Well, it's an acronym. The Prawnheads group has been having lunch for a decade or two, perhaps more, and in the beginning the group consisted of amateurs, wireless network geeks and techie-type folk, and they met in a noodle house. So here goes the acronym: Perth Radio and Wireless Noodle House Eating and Discussion Society. Perth Radio and Wireless Noodle House Eating and Discussion Society, Prawnheads. We meet for lunch at 12 noon at Shoe, upstairs at Yagan Square. We'd love to see you join us. Now moving on to RASA, the Radio Amateur Society of Australia, and RASA's annual general meeting is happening on Saturday the 7th of September, and if you remember, you will have received an invitation. If you're not a member, go to the website, vkradioamateurs.org, and you can join up. And the meeting is at 10:30 Eastern Standard Time, so that's 8:30 a.m, breakfast time for us here in WA. As with previous years, the meeting will be streamed live and recorded on YouTube, with links being sent to all RASA members shortly before proceedings commence. An excellent resource, especially for new amateurs or those studying for a licence, is the VK Regs website and the associated handbook. Both the VK Regs website and the downloadable handbook have been updated recently to reflect changes made by the ACMA when the class licence for amateurs was introduced earlier this year. The VK Regs resource was created and maintained by RASA and is available to anyone free of charge. If you're starting on gaining your foundation level certificate, you'll find RASA's foundation level study guide invaluable as it leads you through the entire foundation syllabus, clearly explained with live links to instructional videos and information sources. The foundation level study guide is a RASA initiative and is available free. Yep, free, no cost, gratis for nothing, from our vkradioamateurs.org website. And while you're there, take a look at what else is free. And I'm Bob VK6POP and I'm the Vice President of RASA.
Hi there, it's Clinton, VK6FCRC, back with you. And did you know that Newswest is now on YouTube? Type in youtube.com/@Newswest weekly podcast -Kilo Zulu 7 Yankee Charlie. Oh, and before I go, I'd like to thank those watching on YouTube or ATV, the readers, and you for listening. I'd also like to thank our team, the broadcasters, and those submitting content each week. Please stand by now for callbacks after the broadcast, or head over to the VK6.net website and fill out the form so we know how many people are listening each week.